Okay, let's start off a new topic here. Our topic on this tight topic on Photoshop is going to be about selections. One of the great things Photoshop does is being able to do selections. Since it's pixel based as opposed to parametric based like Lightroom, you can select certain pixels in a picture and edit just those pixels. So selections is one of its most powerful tools. That along, of course, with some of the content aware tools. So let's get into that. I've got three pictures here. One of my granddaughter and wife I'll use to make some complex selections, including her hair here, flyaway hair, typical teenager. And I've got other pictures here that we can use. This bird in front of a lot of branches. I'll make a selection there, and also using a color selection on the sky to get all the sky in between the branches. And finally, there's a selection based on focus, and you can make selections that way. So let's go through what they are. Okay. Looking down the left-hand side toolbar, you'll see a number of icons over here. The first group of icons are selection icons. There's a rectangular marquee tool. There's a polygonal tool. Under the marquee tool, if I hold down that little arrow key and hold it, there's an elliptical tool. You can also select a single row of pixels, which I don't know what the reason for that would be. But these rectangular tools and elliptical tools are decent tools to use for certain things. If I wanted a rectangular selection, in this case it wouldn't make much sense, but I could, for example, if the people weren't there, I could select off the sky area here, So that would be a way of making a selection with using the rectangular tool. Then I could do different things with that selection. Going to layers, I could create a new layer with that selection, etc. So that's one thing. The the things to remember is shortcuts. If I wanted to increase the selection, for example, on the rectangular tool, if I held down the Shift key, and this happens with all. This is good with all selection tools. If I hold down the Shift key, you'll see a little plus sign show up next to the. See, without the Shift key, there's no plus sign. With the Shift key, there's a plus sign. Now, if I wanted to add that rectangular tool, I could do that. Just made it bigger. If I wanted to subtract from the rectangular tool, I'd hold down the Option key, and if I hold down the Option key, you'll see a little negative sign show up. So if I wanted to subtract off, something right in the middle here, I could do that. So now I've got still two selections here. So that Shift key adds, Option key or Alt key subtracts. Okay. Now let's one more shortcut that's good to know is Command or Control D. That's deselect. So say I want to deselect that and I want to use the circular tool. So I Command or Control D, I deselected it. Okay. Now I can go use the circular tool, which is very similar to the rectangular tool, except it's a circle, right? So if I hit Shift, I can add to that selection. If I hit Option, Option, I could subtract from that selection. Okay, Command D, deselect. So these kind of tools over here will select circles and squares, and they're good for certain reasons. This tool here, the polygonal lasso tool, is very similar to that. I can select off an area of the picture by going around clicking an area. And then coming back and joining them together. By the way, when you do come back, let's do a deselect. Going around, you'll see as I click and I come back to the area when I join it, you'll see a little icon show up, a little circular icon there. That means okay, join it. That you made the circle. Okay, so the polygonal tool is useful for certain things too. And then as you get below these tools here, you start getting into some more sophisticated tools. Deselect, Command D. Let's use these tools are some of the ones that have been around a long time. Not the object selection, that's a relatively new one. The quick selection tool is one I use a lot, and the magic wand tool I use a lot. Quick selection tool, you just drag the selection tool over what you want. So there's a little circle there. You can make that circle bigger or smaller. And say I wanted to select the sky here. I could start by just starting to drag, and it has some intelligence to it. So as I drag, it'll start to try to figure out what it is I want to try to select. You'll see what starting to select the sky around the heads of people, and it's not always perfect, but it does pretty decently. So I've gotten a lot of the sky selected. Of course, it's gotten into areas I don't want it to get into. But this tool works pretty well for selecting certain things. So I'll deselect there. See if I can select that windmill back there by just one click on it. It looks pretty good. Now, of course, trying to select the fans and everything else, I would probably reduce the size of this tool and start to. I actually doing one click instead of dragging over there and doing one click on these things. It starts to define what I want to select. It did pretty good. See, there's an area here. It's selected right on top of the windmill here. If I hit down the Option key and click in that area, and click a couple of times in that area, it'll deselect. Now, there's some smartness in the tool. As you go around, it starts to learn what it is you want to get a hold of here. So that works pretty decently. For example, now having selected a particular group of pixels here, you can do different things with them. Let me take this picture of myself out of here. Sorry, I didn't realize it was down there. I can now say, for example, I can do let's go to hue and saturation and change the color of that windmill back there to a different color. Okay, I got a purple windmill, got a red windmill, whatever it is. I can run the saturation up on the color of the windmill, make it a different color. So now I can change the color of the windmill to something else. So you can make selections and do some different things with it. Okay, so I'll get out of that, drop that into the garbage can. So that's the the quick selection tool. Very, very useful tool. A magic wand tool. Let me use the magic wand tool somewhere else just to show you what that does. Magic wand tool selects based on color. So how would I get this whole sky selected here so I could do some editing on it? Well, what I would do is I would try the magic wand tool. I see I've selected the magic wand tool, and you can see the wand icon up there. There's a tolerance up here. Now I'm selecting a sample size. I wouldn't want to select a point sample because I might be selecting a speck of dust here, or a little cloud or something. I want to select more than a point sample. So I'm going to select a 5 by 5 pixel sample. I'm giving it some tolerance here. The higher the tolerance, the more colors it's going to select. So let's just try this sort of 14 tolerance, see what happens. Contiguous. If I have contiguous, it's only going to select the blues where I click here, for example. There you go. And wherever it hits a branch, it won't select inside these branches, for example. So if you want it contiguous or not contiguous, that's an important distinction. Sample all layers. If you have a bunch of layers down here below, you're saying look at all the layers for that color. So I'm going to go Command D. I'm going to hit using the tolerance of 14. I'm going to click again on there, and you can see what it did. It selected quite a bit of the in between the branches and everything else. Now it did select a little bit of the bird here and things like that, but for most sakes it's pretty good. Now what I can do, for example, with that selection, if I go to an adjustment and let's go to color adjustment, hue saturation, and let's run the saturation up on the sky, make it bluer. So I'm making the sky a little bluer. Now you can see where it didn't select. I should probably have gone back and cleaned up the selection a little bit. But I can now do different things with my selection. The better thing to have done would have been to, let's go back to history, go back to beginning, make a selection again with a little bit bigger tolerance. Looking around, it looks like it did a better job in some of these areas. I will say it did. So I could actually put try a Shift plus if it didn't, but let's say that was better. It looks a little bit better to me. And now I can go to layers, adjustments, hue saturation. Run the hues fine, saturation. Run the saturation up, make my sky a little deeper blue. There you go. So I was able to deepen the sky, the color of the sky down a little bit. I could also make it a little bit darker if I wanted to. So that's the Magic Wand tool. It makes selections based on color, and that's where these three tools. Now the Object Selection tool is extremely interesting. It's one of the newer tools. Say for example I wanted to select this bird here, and there's a bunch of branches behind it. I don't know. I have not tried it on that one here. I've tried it on different. Let me go back to another picture. Yeah, I could do that here if I wanted to select that this windmill back here. It essentially puts a rectangle about what you want to select. When you release, it thinks for a second and decides what's the object in there. It selected the windmill. Now if I hit down the Shift key to add to that selection, say I want to select this other windmill over here. Again, click, and it selected the other windmill. It didn't do a perfect job, didn't select this vein on it over here. But that's what the object selection does. I can hit the Shift key and add to it, Option key to subtract to it. If I go back to this bird here, for example, I can do the same thing. I want to select just the bird, go around the bird. Just did a fantastic job. Didn't quite get the beak, but if I want to get the beak now, I hit the Shift key to add to it, and say, look, I want to add that beak to it. Now, Option key to subtract. I don't want to have that little piece there, nor that little piece there. So it's getting better. You get the idea. The object selection tool is pretty good. There's a little piece of bird right in there I'd like to get. Okay, now I've got the bird selected. I can do all sorts of things with that bird, like have him fly off, for example. Okay, we will go back and deselect. All right, let me go back to history. Opening bird. Okay, so that's the object selection tool. It's a pretty powerful tool, and you'll find that in the left column. Now there's some other. You'll notice here, by the way, that they do show you how the tools work when you hit the pop-up. When you go above, you'll see select. Okay, there's some selections based on this too. For example, select color range or focus area, and the best one of all is select subject. This thing is brand new and it really worked well. Select and mask is another feature that's important to know, and I'll show you that in a minute. But let's do select focus area. This one is tough. It's never really worked very well as far as I'm concerned. But let's say you see it's thinking, and I've set the focus range here, and it's going to try to select what's in focus versus what's out of focus. Right now it's made no selection, so let's change the parameter and run it down a little bit, see what happens. Hey, it's starting to select the bird a little bit there, and some of these flowers, they turn them white. So you'll see if I change this, I can see black and white. I can make it look more like a mask, like you'd suggest, although it looks like it's blacking out the bird and selecting the others. So if I run the focus range down a little bit more, will it select more of the bird or less the bird or whatever? I'm just saying, be more picky about what you're selecting. I have never found this to work very well. It's supposed to work based on focus range, and I've never been very pleased with the way this one works, but it's an old tool. Frankly, I'm going to cancel out of this. I wouldn't suggest using this tool. I don't like it. There's much better tools. For example, the select subject. Anytime you select one of these items over here in the toolbar, you're going to have options. So if I go to say, for example, this one here, down here where I've got not these tools up above, the ones down below, the object selection, the quick selection, the magic tool one, I'm going to see something up here called select subject. I'll also see it up here, select subject. Okay. If I hit select subject, there's an artificial intelligence in here that immediately looks for the subject and selects it. So it doesn't matter what picture I go to. Now this one's going to be more difficult. What's the subject in this picture? Obviously the bird. Can it pick it out? It did. It missed some feathers up here. It's missed a little bit of the beak, but we can fix that. But it's done and it's missed the feet. But it's done a pretty decent job of figuring out the subject. Also missed some of the neck. This one's a tough one. The one that always amazes me is how it does with selecting hair. Deselect. Let's go back to this picture here. Hair has always notoriously been hard to select. If I try, for example, let's try an old tool that used to be around for years, and the quick selection tool. Say I wanted to get my granddaughter and select her out of this picture. I would drag over her, okay, and it'll start to select her. You see, there's hair missing, but there are tools to fix that, and that's the selected mask tools. So I'm saying, let's say I've got her pretty well selected. I got, let's say that for anything's sakes, I've selected part of the sky over here by the windmill. Hit down option. This is the way you'd have to select before select subject. Okay, and why it did that? Let's go back. So I've got it pretty well selected. I'm going to have to go back and pick that. So the way you would do that, and then you would use something called Select and Mask to pick up the hair. Okay, so I would go to Select and Mask, and then I would start brushing around outside. Brush size not that big, around outside, and saying, look at, I want, with this over here on the left selected, this is the smart, the second icon down is a smart one. The first one is just quick selection tool like you've seen before. The second one is refine edge tool. It's the one you want to use. If you go around the edge of the subject, you would then try to start telling Photoshop to pick up the hair. You can see what it's doing. It's picking up the hair strands around the edge. Okay, and also not deselecting where the hair where it shouldn't be selection. So I can go around here and start to say, okay, I've got the hair better selected. This is the way you would typically have done it in the past, and you may even do it in now like that. So how this tool works. I've got the opacity. You've got different ways you can look at this too. By the way, I can look at this as black and white. You can see how it's done with the hair. Depending on how your preferences, you can set this to what you'd like over here. You typically would do a little radius on it. That's just telling Photoshop to look out a little bit around what you got selected to see if there's something else out there that should pick up. I wouldn't put the radius up too high. Too high, it's going to look out too far. In this case, it's not doing that too much, although it's softened the edges down here quite a bit. I'll bring it back. It's hardened up the edges a little bit. That's good. I would say that's getting pretty darn good. These other feathering is always good. Sometimes if you're getting a little haloing around things, but that's a little bit another subject. When you finish this refine edge tool, then you can say, do I want this sent out as a selection, a layer mask, a new layer with a layer mask, or what? Say for example, I want it as just a layer mask. Okay, I'll click layer mask, and you'll see what happens. This comes up. When I go to layers, there's now a layer mask. This allows me to go in and refine things. That was the old way of selecting a subject with hair. Did a reasonably good job, but it was a lot of work. But I showed you it was pretty quick. To get it done right, I'd probably have to do a lot more work. Let's go back now and a little bit history panel again to go to the beginning. If I had, instead of that, I'd say select subject. Okay. The beauty of this, now I'm going to select my wife and my granddaughter in this case, but let's say that's okay. Select subject. What amazes me, as you can see up here, it's done a good job of looking for hair and everything else around the edges. If I go now to select and mask, you can see a lot of the hair has been selected. I can still go up here and do a little refining on it. It doesn't do any harm to finish it off. But it has done a really good job of figuring out who the subject was in that picture and selecting them off. So that's a real good tool. There's obviously some work that has to be done out here. It's doing some funky selections on the side, but that is the idea with some of the selection tools. So you've seen the selection tools down the left-hand side, and you've seen the selection tools up here. One of the things you've seen select mask, select subject. Modifies, once you've got a selection like I've got in this one particular here, in some cases you'll want, especially if you're using the content aware tools, you'll want to modify the selection and expand it a bit so it cuts in. Let me show you an example of that. Say I wanted to get rid of this windmill back here. Okay, I'm going to show you a content aware tool, but well, object selection. Let's just, for example, go over the windmill here. Now it's done a selection of the windmill. If I don't do anything to it right now, and I go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware, it'll fill that, but you can see that there's messy edges around it. Okay, what I would rather, it didn't do a very good job at all. Let me do something different here. Let me deselect that and go back to the beginning. I'm going to make another selection of that same windmill though. Okay, but this time I'm going to go to select, modify, expand, so that the selection cuts into the surroundings. So it does a content aware. I'm going to make 10 pixels out of this thing just so it cuts in big. So now it's made a bigger selection around that. Now if I do a edit, fill, content aware, hopefully it'll do a better job. There, it did a better job. Did a much better job. A little remnants here, but it's if you're making that kind of selection and replacement, sometimes it's good to go ahead and use that expand tool to cut into the area around it. So when it makes the replacement, it does a better job. So, anyways, I hope that helped. Good.